Monday, June 10th, 2024. Any notice of new business? Adoption of the agenda. Moved by Councillor Graziano, second by Councillor Turnbull. Discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. No guest delegations. Gallery comments on agenda topics.
Thank you.
Adoption of minutes, we got one set there from May 27th of Committee of the Whole, moved by Councillor Graziano, second by Councillor Giesbrecht. Any errors or omissions in those minutes?
There might be one, I'm not sure. Page 5 out of 115. Talks about under the special events bylaw, the very first bullet. Now I'm looking to my fellow council where we were talking about, in my memory, that we didn't mind if people were distributing flyers or putting up notices and that, and this was just worded very specific that they could put up a event notice subject to removal within 24 hours of the event. In my memory, we didn't have those stipulations on there. I'm just looking to my fellow council to see.
And what page were you talking about again?
About whether they can,
And what page?
oh, 5.
5. Oh, right there. I don't remember that either.
Being that
About-
specific,
No.
I thought I did remember something, because we don't want people just putting stuff up and then leaving it there. It has to be taken down, but I don't remember that we actually agreed on
We
a
say that.
time. We did agree there had to be a time.
Yeah.
Maybe it just got filled in with a reasonable time to see if we were okay with it.
And we'll see it when it comes back to us again too.
Yeah,
I just
right,
noticed that.
Okay. Okay, all in favor of adoption of those minutes? Opposed? Carried. Business arising from the minutes? That might have been more business arising, but might have been a mistake. None? No correspondence, no new business. Committee, anything to report? No. Staff reports, long-term debt transition now.
Thank you. So council may or may not remember that we took out some financing to support the construction of the Jarvis Crescent subdivision. You will also see it referred to as parcel Z because at the time it did not have a name. So in 2018, there was a loan authorization bylaw that was passed. Approval of the electors was received at that time. And once the ministry provided approval of the bylaw, we were able to adopt a temporary borrowing bylaw to get the funds short-term to help construct the subdivision. So now we're at this stage that the Jarvis Crescent subdivision was completed. We recently installed a playground over there as well. And all long-term debt needs to be borrowed through the MFA, and we need to look at transitioning our debt from the short-term into the long-term. So I have provided some information for council's consideration for 5, 10, 15, and 20 years. The way that the MFA's debt works is that 99% of the gross request is received by the regional district and then the municipality, with 1% being held in default against the loan. Our loan authorization bylaw allows for up to 20 years. And the way that they issue debt is usually in 10-year bonds. So if you go anything greater than 10 years, you have a potential early payment timeframe of 10 years or 15 years because they do the refinancing at 5-year increments after the first 10-year period. So interest payments would be semi-annually and begin 6 months after the initial debt transition. And they are paid on the initial amount, unfortunately, rather than a declining balance of the interest or of the principal amount. And the interest rates are locked in for 10 years. The interest rates that are used in this estimate scenario are from the MFA's website that are indicative of their lending rates that they're anticipating, but the MFA will do their best to get the lowest interest rates we possibly can for whatever debt issuance we need to see. So principal payments are paid annually, 1 year after funds are received, and they're put into a sinking fund. And the MFA hopes to gain some interest on having those funds in reserve, which is called the actuarial. So you'll see that on the on the estimates provided for the different issues. So the principal repayment for each of those issues plus the actuarial will equal the total amount of the debt borrowed initially. So looking at the options for long-term debt, I provided you with all the background, but I'm going to jump right into Appendix 2, which is on page 17 of the agenda. So looking at section 1 of this is what our borrowing needs look like. So what our balance was at December 31st with our 2024 principal repayment and what's left in our debt retirement reserve, what we would have for outstanding debt plus 1%. Of course, we would only get 99% of the proceeds. We want to make sure we're managing that repayment. So our total borrowing amount that we're looking to go to the MFA for is $3.5 million. The section 2 shows that in the 5-year, 10-year, 15, and 20-year issue, the total long-term borrowing cost, so that is the principal and interest that would be paid for each of those issuances. And to the right, you'll see the increase per issuance from 5 to 10 years, 10 to 15 years at the 10-year early payment, and so on. So section 3 is looking at the annual borrowing costs. So right now in our 2024 budget, we have for principal and interest payments, we're approximately $327,000 is what we have. If you looked at the 5-year issue, your estimated payment would be around $800,000, but your debt would be paid out in 5 years.
That's per year.
That's per year
Okay.
between principal and interest. So your budget would need to increase by approximately $477,000 per year to manage that debt repayment in 5 years. The 10-year is looking at an estimated annual payment of $455,000, an increase of approximately $128,000. A 15-year issue is approximately $344,000 per year. So an estimated increase of just under $18,000. And in a 20-year issue, the estimated payment is approximately $285,000. So in that particular scenario, you see a budget decrease of $41,000. In the event that you did a 15 or 20-year issue, I have identified what the lump sum payment would need to be if you chose to proceed with the early payment opportunities. So in the 15-year issue at 10 years, or in the 20-year issue at the 10 and the 15-year issue. Section 4 kind of looks at the cost analysis, historical and proposed in a 20-year issue with a 10-year early payout for the Jarvis subdivision. So historically, we have repaid approximately $665,000 of principal repayment so far. We have paid approximately $548,000 worth of interest. Again, 2024 interest rates are estimated because we don't have those full rates. That's just what we have budgeted currently. So in a proposed debt expense scenario, if council were to look at a 20-year debt issue with a 10-year early payout plan, you would pay $3.4 million in principal and $1.7 million of interest. That means that between 2020, when the initial debt was taken out, and 2035, the early debt repayment, you would have paid an additional $2.3 million in interest in that time frame. Your debt bylaw approved the borrowing for $4.2 million. So the approximate financing cost, which is above that value, is $2.2 million. Looking at the repayment analysis, if we did a 20-year term issue, if you kept your budget at $327,000, your estimated debt repayment is $285,000. You'd have a surplus, essentially, approximately $41,000. If you take that $41,000 and put it into your early debt repayment fund, you'd have approximately $418,000 just from that surplus without changing your annual budget. You'd still need an additional $1.6 million to support that early debt repayout in 10 years. Looking at our current schedule of interest, if 100% of the interest that the district plans to, or is expecting to receive over the next 10 years is 100% devoted to reserves with a sufficient portion towards the debt retirement reserve to support this early debt payout. At a basic level, there would be enough interest earned if $9 million stays in reserve to help us build that interest over the next 10 years. And the interest rates that we receive in the future are the same or better to what we're currently seeing. Of course, we can't foresee that far, so the analysis is subject to change depending on how things progress. But if you don't consider the annual compound interest that we would get by keeping additional money in reserves to build upon that, you, at a basic level, you would be gaining enough interest to pay off the interest for Jarvis and support the principal repayment in 10 years. So that is a high-level summary of that. So the key considerations when I analyzed this information is the annual borrowing cost for a 20-year term is less than our existing annual budget. So over the next 10 years, you can get $420,000 plus interest can be allocated towards supporting debt retirement without impacting the current budget. With longer debt terms, increases the overall borrowing cost, of course. It does reduce the overall risk to the municipality in the event that we can't come up with the principal and save a 5-year term. It also maintains the ability to provide the level of service that you are currently providing to the community because there's no additional impact by increasing the current budget. The annual borrowing costs for 15 and 20 years have the least impact on your existing financial plan. So again, as I noted, you can maintain your existing service levels while managing your annual long-term debt contributions. The lower annual cost of borrowing provides greater cash flow flexibility for the district in the event that municipal needs change over time, because 10 years is still a long time. Any revenue received from the sale of lots in Jarvis Crescent have not been considered as part of this analysis. So any money that the municipality does receive from selling those lots will go directly to help support the repayment of this early debt. So this is just saying in the event you don't sell any, that's what it could look like. But our hope is that we do, and that will go directly towards the repayment. Assuming again that interest rates for existing term deposits remain generally consistent and that $9 million remains in the district's reserves, the minimum amount of interest that we expect could be sufficient to cover the cost of the early debt retirement in 10 years if 100% of that interest does go towards supporting that. In our current budget, 56% of investment interest is currently allocated to go straight to reserves, with the rest going to support operations.
I'm sorry, the rest going to what?
To support operations.
Thank you.
So what the district needs to do today to proceed to get to long-term financing is we need to adopt a municipal security issuing resolution that we then forward on to the regional district. So because the municipality cannot borrow money itself, we have to borrow money through the regional district. And then once we supply that resolution to the regional district, they will adopt a security issuing bylaw to allow the district or the Peace River Regional District to borrow on behalf of the district. So.
Why is that?
Questions?
You're in the regional district. Why don't municipalities just borrow on their own?
From the local government.
Yeah, it is.
Local government act?
Yeah, it's a legislative process that
Interesting.
long-term debt has to be funded through the MFA, and they fund it through the regional district, probably because the municipality is a partner of the overall regional district. But I didn't come prepared with that.
Oh, I'm just curious, because you think of different municipalities in the regional district could be carrying buckload of debt.
Oh,
Yes,
yes.
it does sit on our financials rather than theirs. They are
Okay.
just the flow through of information.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
You will definitely see it on the financial statement still.
Okay, questions?
I do have a question just specifically on this. Whichever term especially if we do a long term, future councils, let's say 5 years, 6 years, how much does this affect their ability if they want to do things and borrow things?
So because we've already got this debt outstanding, it affects the liability servicing limit. So we'd have to figure out how much we can borrow based on how much we bring into. So it doesn't actually change the position we're in currently, but the longer you go out, if you don't repay it within the 10-year time frame, it will impact the amount that you were, the total amount you were able to borrow.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. What do we do? I understand the sale lot, we'll go back into it, but let's say we pay off half the debt. And it kind of coincides with selling the lots, we pay the other half. What do we do with the money from the other 25 lots? So it's paid for, and now we're gonna get revenue from 25 of the lots. What do we do with that?
So that goes into your sale of lots reserve. And then depending, because there are legislative requirements of how you can use the money from the sale of lots reserve. And one of the first things is to paying off any debt related to it. So subject to it all being paid off and you're like, hey, we've got all of this additional money, the council determines how they want to use that money within the parameters of the sale of lots reserve.
Because the intent when Jarvis was developed was the money from the sale of lots would pay for this subdivision. So if we are taxing people to pay for the subdivision, then the money comes back. I think we gotta be really aware of what happens with that money.
Where it
Because
was first
now,
taken from.
right. Like back, yes. So, and what's in our account for the sale of lots reserve now?
Currently, I'll have to pull that data up. I don't have it. Just ready for me.
We should have some in there for sure.
We definitely do have some in there. Get our financials.
I'm all for paying the debt early, but I want to be very aware that we're pulling money then from taxpayers to pay for a subdivision that is going to be bought
Mhm.
by the people who are living there. So
Mhm.
if we had money in the sale of lots reserve, that could, if we upped what we're paying to a shorter term, that we could pull out from there to pay the difference rather than
Taking more.
taking more tax money.
So you have approximately 800,000
Right.
in the sale of lots reserve. And so the policy, which is an alignment, because the sale of lots reserve is a statutory reserve. And so looking at the uses for the statutory reserve fund is that the municipality can use the funds for paying off the debt remaining in relation to the property and for acquiring land and improvements and other assets of a capital nature. In the district's bylaw, assets of a capital nature include the purchase of machinery and equipment to maintain municipal property. So that is specifically what our bylaw says.
But
in
we
regards
should be able to pay the debt for Jarvis off with that.
You could. I would need to follow up just to verify that the existing money that's in there, because it was from previous sale of lots, the
Right.
debt that we have is not related to the money that's in there right now. So it's just very specific in saying the debt remaining in relation to that property.
Right. Which
So I
it
would just wanna
should-
make
it
sure.
should be, but yeah. Okay, because there is the potential we could take the extra, pull it out of there each year until it's, hopefully we start selling lots, and then you use the extra from the sale of lots, right?
Or to make up the difference.
To make up the difference rather than increasing the taxes.
Right.
Yeah, so in the event that council can use it, you could say, I'm gonna use the existing $800,000 plus the sale of lots to pay, to support that early debt retirement.
Because essentially what we take out of that is gonna go back in it on the other end. Right?
'Cause
Makes
right-
sense.
Yeah.
What we take out will go back. It'll just be on the other end rather than pulling from the taxes. Okay,
And then in the meantime, that money that's sitting there is helping you gain interest with your investment strategy.
Right.
And our hope is that we continue to get better interest rates.
If only we had a crystal ball. I'm so glad you and Courtney like all this stuff, and then you put it in terms that we can so understand. I just, thank you.
Yeah, well, it's still hard because it's a lot of money and when you look at the interest, but my hope is that with the interest that we can make on what we're sitting in reserves, if we again keep our reserves sustained, we'll be able to recover the amount that we have paid for Total Jarvis interest in its entirety, which then has a lesser impact on the taxpayers because then you can say
Yeah.
it was funded with interest money over.
Okay, thank you.
I would strongly recommend forwarding this to council should council be amenable.
Today?
Today.
Okay. And then? Are you recommending the 20-year one?
I was recommending the 20-year one because of the level of service impact. It does have higher financing cost, as a less annual financial impact. And because council term changes every 4 years, you never know what level of service impacts may be impacted. So it just gives you a little bit more capital flexibility.
With the intent of using the sale of lots to
And
Yep.
pay it.
pay it
Because
off
you can
early.
still pay it off early, even
Yeah.
if you have the 20-year term, right?
Mhm, yeah, at the 10-year is what I recommend.
But the 20-year gives you some insurance.
And then the lower payments, like I said, you could also use the sale of lot reserve to pay some of that up front.
Subject to us being.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
So are we moving that to council tonight or?
Yeah, but we have to do it at council.
Oh, perfect.
12.2, draft zoning bylaw number 887/2024, Ms. Ward.
Thank you. So the proposed bylaw that you see in front of you is incorporating all of the small scale multi-unit housing legislation, which that's resulting in editing our text in the zoning bylaw that are required through the Bill 44 housing statutes. So what is in this bylaw is only what is in this legislation. There's nothing else that's been added at this time. It's just what Bill 44 requires us to add in there. I did want to note that an error has been identified in 4.5.2, which is on page 48. It should say no accessory dwelling unit as building or garden suite has been removed from the definitions. So that's a small clerical error that can be amended. And that is, do you have any questions? Have you had a chance to look at the report? Read all the changes are shown in this table in the report.
Questions?
I would comment the same thing about you guys, about you legislative. I'm so glad that we have all of you to translate all this and look at it. My comment is there was a few things about parking restrictions, height allowance, and maximum meters that have staff is not a requirement and we don't need to do that. I agree with staff's recommendations on all three of those.
So this has been included on the agenda for regular council meetings, the first two readings, as there was no requirement for public hearing for this as per the provision.
Okay, any other questions? We will have another opportunity shortly. Thank you. 12.3, community services departmental update. Who would like to take that? Defer?
I'm sure we read it too.
Sure.
Did council have any questions?
Does anybody know how the hill climb went? Somebody anecdotally told me it was very quiet.
Sorry, what was that?
The hill climb? I'm just curious. It's not important, just I'd heard through resident that it was really quiet. So, that's all.
I haven't heard, wasn't there.
No, me neither.
the community members that got the prizes were very excited.
Really?
Came in excited to get it. It was just the wrong facility, but really excited to pick those up, but that was the only thing that I had heard.
Well, that'll be a question for community
And it's,
services.
like I said, it's not important, I was just curious.
Do we keep doing things for the sake of doing them if they're
It
not?
depends,
intended?
maybe I heard wrong, you know, if somebody just goes within this small time frame and they see 2 people, they might think the whole event was, hardly anybody was there. You just don't know.
Yeah, because it was at one time very busy.
Oh, there used to be a big barbecue and everything with that.
Okay, so no questions for the update? We'll go to 12.4, Corporate Services Departmental Update. Ms. Collier and
I'll start us off. So in financial services, we've been working on all kinds of new and exciting things. Big ones being the annual report, as usual. We have a couple of reports that are within there. Finishing up the Q1 reporting, which you'll see later this evening. We've been in training of Ms. Ford for my position in the interim, and that's been going really well. We've accomplished quite a bit. We're still cross-training the records management clerk in finance, so she'll be taking her turns through each of the positions to make sure we have coverage if needed. There's been some land development projects being worked on, as you're aware of. We got out the 2024 property taxes. We've seen a lot of people in making payments, which always makes us feel happy. We are working on 2024 tax sale preparations. By preparations, I mean hopes that we don't have one, because that's the last thing we want to do. The 2 more exciting things that I'm excited to talk about is that our chart of accounts has been rolled out. We are using it now. It is up and operational. It was a ton of work. I will say Ms. Pinella did a lot of that back end work, so thank you to her. And we are working on wrapping up the integration of Questica to go along with that. So that's the new budgeting software that we'll be using. So
You like what you're seeing so far?
so far, so good. We've started some training. Tyler's held a couple of sessions already to get everybody on the same page and how to use it. So yeah, very happy with everything so far. Anything you want to add to those?
I will be bringing forward a report to council to show you kind of this is the way you've seen the budget and give you the opportunity of this is now what it looks like, so that we have a bit of a conversation about how it'll be presented in the future, and we can get council's input on additional things that you may want to see with the financial reporting structure and how the transition will be. So to be continued.
And the same thing goes for the quarterly financials. This one that you see tonight will be consistent with what you've seen before, and then going into Q2, it'll be new with Questica and all of that. So we're not exactly sure how it'll look, but you'll have all the same information and hopefully a shinier package. So that is finance. I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. So we've been working on, in the Legislative Services Department, some annual report development for 2023, recruitment for the interim deputy corporate officer, ongoing development of co-working space agreements for the vacant office space, which is undergoing some minor updates right now, painting and that type of thing. So support for draft zoning bylaw development, some procurement for the ice center concession and residential curbside garbage collection, records management project plan development, coordination of our IT inventory and land administration support. Going forward till our next report, the plan is to continue on with planning with our First Nations Land Acknowledgement Development Committee, ongoing community to community meeting coordination, continued development of the co-working space agreements, onboarding and training of our interim deputy corporate officer, who is here with us today, ongoing recruitment support, bylaw, human resources, council support, etc.
thank you. Questions?
Busy.
I have one quick question. Did we get a whole bunch of feedback with the little note that was with your tax notice about the mistake? That was the first thing my wife asked.
Yeah.
What's this?
We were waiting to hear. We have not heard from my team reporting back to me. I haven't heard anyone say anything about it. The feedback from staff as they read their own was, oh, I got a break last year. So I hope that that's the feedback elsewhere.
And that is the truth.
Yeah.
It's, yeah. Larry just said, I don't know what somebody was talking about, and I was talking about it, and he goes, it is? I said, well, it's in the taxes. Oh, okay.
I'd like to know what I did with that extra money. Okay, thank you. Media and gallery. And no closed committee. So we'll adjourn this one. A little break.